I showed up my first day at work and he'd hand me this, huge roll of blueprints and said, here, figure out how to get this thing built. So like, that big 180,000 square foot power center called up and said, we're not going to pay rent. The thing that's really rewarding about what we do with development is that we take these ideas of, this bare piece of ground and we turn it into a building that somebody lives in, somebody, has an office in, or they're selling dresses out of, or they're manufacturing fire trucks out of. It's actually getting used.
I'm here at a Secrets Resort in Mexico, courtesy of MacArthur Company and their customer incentive programs. If you guys are in roofing, siding, sheet metal, insulation, mechanical work, and you're not buying your materials from MacArthur, check them out and make sure you ask about the customer incentive trip so you can start earning points for a trip like this. Hey there, and welcome to From the Ground Up Show, the show where we encourage and inspire the next generation of free-thinking leaders by telling the stories of those that have been there, done that, and are still getting it done, building a life that they love with their hearts, their hands, and their hustle. I'm your host, Eric Loden. If you guys are listening on podcast, make sure you catch it on YouTube for the full video version. And we are on all major social media platforms at From the Ground Up Show. If you guys can like, share, follow, subscribe, all the things. And if you want to pause the show for just a moment here and send this episode to somebody that might benefit from it, we really appreciate that. Also, check out our new merch store, shop.fromthegroundupshow.com for all your From the Ground Up Show merchandise. Today, I am super excited and honored to have Steve Van Buskirk joining us. Steve is the owner and CEO of Van Buskirk Companies in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Van Buskirk has developed/established 40 neighborhoods, 120 commercial developments, and they have sold 6,600 lots. They have built 1,125 apartments. Steve and his company have quite literally built Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Steve has an incredible amount of experience in land development, construction, and property management. So, Steve, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm excited to glean a little bit of your experience and learn a little bit more about your business. So we like to start off every show just getting to know you a little bit. So could you tell us a little bit about your life growing up?
Yeah, absolutely. I will. The one thing I want to talk to your listeners about is that it's a family business. So I've got partners, and we'll get into that more. So I got the intro there. My brother's my co-CEO, or we're co-CEOs, and my brother and sister in the business, and we're second generation, but we'll get into that as we go forward. So it's a group effort. So all that stuff that you listed off is way too exhausting for one person to do by themselves. It's definitely a team effort. But yeah, so you're asking about growing up. Yeah, I grew up I was born in Dubuque, Iowa. My dad was an engineer at John Deere. He wanted to get back closer to Hitchcock, South Dakota, which is close to Huron, South Dakota, in the middle of the state. And that's where my mom and dad grew up, is in Huron, Hitchcock. And they are tired of living out in other parts of the country. So they moved back, and we're always happy that they didn't go quite as far back as Huron. They stopped in Sioux Falls along the way, because Sioux Falls is just an amazing economic community and opportunity, for people in the construction and development business. My parents came back in '71, so I was just out in Iowa for just a minute. I moved back in '71, and I was born and raised in Sioux Falls, and grew up as the town grew up. So when we moved back in '71, Sioux Falls started kind of the decades. In '70 it was 70,000, 80,000, 90,000 is kind of how the population of Sioux Falls tracked. So it really saw that community grow up from a town that really, from my perspective as a young person, didn't have a whole lot going on. It was one of those places where you wanted to grow up and go out and see greener things in a bigger city when you're all done. But it's been a part and fun part to be part of that growth and watch it grow up as I was there.
You said this was a family business. I'm assuming it was your dad that started the business?
Yeah, yeah. My mom and dad wanted to start the business. Their idea was to start a manufacturing business. He's a mechanical engineer from South Dakota State University, but he wanted to start a manufacturing business, so he came back to start a truss plant, which is roof trusses and floor trusses that most people are familiar with. So he started that, and then he figured out he could sell more trusses if he's building houses, and he figured out he could build more houses if he was doing land development. So one thing led to another. As far as their growth pattern through those early years. So, but that was the beginning. So the company actually started in Brandon, and then Sioux Falls came on as they bought a subdivision in Sioux Falls, so they ended up moving the business in Sioux Falls. It's 15 minutes away from each other, but just be a little bit closer to it. But yeah, that was the start of it. It just two people with a crazy dream to do something.
Oh man, yeah, that sounds like a wild adventure. And you said you were born in Iowa, so you were alive when they started the company.
Yeah, yeah, not aware but alive. My older brother's memory, the guy I'm a CEO with now, he remembers coming because he would have been 7 or 8 when it all started. So they came over, and he remembers helping my dad paint the house, that's always debatable how good a 7 or 8 year old was doing, but they bought a house in the middle of Sioux Falls, and came over to get it prepped for the rest of us to move back to South Dakota.
Yeah, okay. All right. And do you remember that move at all? How old were you at that time?
No, I really don't. I was only a one, so a little too young. I do
Okay.
remember our site. I
Yeah.
do remember our first house that we lived on, because the best part about it was in the middle of Sioux Falls, and kitty corner across the street. There's a convenience store, and I knew it as the candy store. So kitty corner across the street. I grew up from a candy store, so it really doesn't get much better than that. So we were in that house for a long time. So yeah, so to reminisce on the childhood a little bit, we're in that house for quite a while. We have some good memories of that. But then we moved to the west side of Sioux Falls, which is Kingswood area. It was really where my dad he got started. In that neighborhood, probably like the late '70s, and we primarily developed residential housing. Gosh, through like probably early 2000s. So we're developing land on the west side of Sioux Falls for 30 years. When I grew out there, I was one of the first houses, the new houses on that whole side of town. My memories as a kid were running around construction job sites and taking the wood and stacking it up and nailing it together to build forts, and crawling through storm sewer pipes and biking around, and generally causing too much trouble on the out in that neighborhood. But that was kind of the back in the '70s and '80s, where kids were, you'd send them out the door and tell them what time dinner was, and you better show up for dinner. That was the cardinal rule around our house. But other than that, stay out there and try not to get in too much trouble. So a lot of good
Yeah.
memories of growing up, and got good friends that to this day they're in Sioux Falls and business in Sioux Falls, and you have a lot of good relationships growing up there. So it's fun. It's fun to be still in that same town that you spent so many years in there, 50 years I guess in Sioux Falls now. So really know a lot of people, and it's fun to do things together, with the people that live there, and we've grown up to be business leaders and advocates for the community in our own right now. So it's fun. It's a good place. And Sioux Falls is a really great place.
That's awesome. Yeah, that sounds like a great way to grow up. It's not a lot dissimilar from the way I grew up. So, growing up in Sioux Falls, your dad had already started the business, and it sounds like he kicked it off and really kicked it into gear early. When did you decide that you were going to go into the family business?
Kind of a strange path with that. We grew up, because we like to joke amongst our family that we're a bunch of farm kids that happen to work in the construction business. So we're always working in it. Those early years in the '70s and '80s, I suspect there wasn't many that didn't have one of the Van Buskirk kids in there cleaning houses and mowing lawns, and trying to keep things in order. I remember growing up with my mom, she'd pick us up from school and we go to the carpet store to pick what color carpet was going in the house, and the tile store and the countertop store and the paint store. That was some of the after school activities. We'd just be, dragging around, running around on carpet piles, having fun while my mom's trying to concentrate on figuring out how to make the house look good so somebody would buy the thing. And so I, grew up with it. I tell that part of the story. I grew up with it, really had no intention of coming back into the business. I was kind of had my fill of, uh, construction business and all that, but went away to college and ended up graduating in 1992, which in that time was and I went to the University of Minnesota, was where I was going to college. So right as I was graduating out of business school, there's a pretty major recession going on at that point, and it seemed like half of Minneapolis was getting laid off. The big companies like Honeywell and 3M and all those. I mean, putting thousands of people out on the street with no jobs. Everybody from college was going out and getting whatever job they could find, something to pay the bills, some sort of service job or labor job or anything. So there's for the new college grads at 92 time frame, is really, really hard to find a job. So trying to figure out what to do. And I've had enough of that working with my hands growing up. So I really wasn't too excited to do that. I was ready to do something professional. So talking to my dad, he said, well, I'm going to retire soon. I'm going to retire soon. This turns into a inside family joke. I'm going to retire soon. And if you ever want to come back here and work in the business, now's the time. Come on back and then you can have a job. That's my best option at the time. So I decided to go back and start in on the business. The joke is that my dad is still, well, he was in the office today. He's 85 years old, so, he hasn't quite figured out how to retire yet. So he doesn't do the day-to-day
Yeah.
operations, but he has long since, he has not come close to retirement because he loves hanging out with the family and he loves what we do. And it's fun to have him there, but yeah, he did not retire. So he kind of suckered me in on that one just a little bit, I think, but anyway, that's the way it worked.
Yeah,
But
you're going to retire soon, in quotes there.
yeah, exactly. Soon. Yeah. 35 years later, you're still doing it. But yeah. So anyway, so I came back in 92, really did not, like a true construction background. It didn't have it. And when I came back, my dad had eyeballed a piece of land and he wanted to build 40 unit apartment buildings on it. And so I showed up my first day at work and he'd hand me this, huge roll of blueprints and said, here, figure out how to get this thing built. So I really, I had to figure out how to get it built. Obviously he's there for a resource and all the contacts and all the history there, but really left it to me, kind of the sink or swim of training methodology is what was employed. So I went to work as a project manager, a superintendent, working on banking side of it, everything that needed to happen to get that apartment, apartment project completed. I really did the whole thing from, soup to nuts. And, so I'm out there at a 21-year-old, no training in construction really. I mean, I've been an observer and around it and, understood a lot, so not like I'd never walked on a job site before, but to actually tell people, this is what we need to do next for scheduling or show them how to do it. I was doing a lot of reading at night, trying to figure out how to get all this stuff done. Internet didn't exist right back then. So that really wasn't part of the resources available, but, so anyway, jumped in, started building apartments, and that's where those 1,000 apartments came from. So, that was the beginning of it. So, got that project done and got it up and built, and then we went on to build probably for another 5-6 years. We kind of went on an apartment building spree, getting some of that side of the business built up. So that's really where I really got my construction experience, because I was there, 12 hours a day or whatever it takes, to figure it all out and manage all those projects. So that was kind of a nice baseline of knowledge for me, to carry me forward, through the rest of my career as we got into other types of construction, commercial construction or whatnot. Really got to understand it at that point. So did that for the early years with the apartments, that basically up to probably about 90, 8, 99. And then I met my wife, or moved in with my wife back in Minnesota, and she was living in Minnesota again. So I took a year off from my career and went back up to University of Minnesota, the Carlson School of Management up there, and got my MBA in finance. I graduated in 99 or 98. I guess I graduated in 98, and I ended up getting married in 99 and drug my wife back to Sioux Falls kicking and screaming because she was not happy about it. But I guess I gave her a good enough sales job. She decided to come. But so about that time, the late 90s, early 2000s, uh, housing was just taking off, because if you think back, we're leading up to the 2005, 2006, bubble and housing meltdown, so all that was taking off in Sioux Falls, and Sioux Falls continues to grow at about 3.5, 4% growth rate year over year. So there's, you know, you know, that, we kind of expect, 4 to 5,000 people a year to show up in town. So, business, the community is
Mhm.
great for people in our business. There are always so many showing up, within reason to buy a house or rent an apartment. But so those early
Yeah.
2000 years, housing was taking off. So we really set aside the multifamily part of the business, started focusing on the land development, the single family housing to really keep up with that effort there. So
Mm.
really had some, crazy busy years in the single family housing development side. So that really kept me busy in there. And at that time, we weren't building houses back then in that period. So those are kind of those early years. And I should interject there, about 4 or 5 years after I got started, my older brother, Mike, who we share the CEO duties with right now, he came back in there and picked up the property management business because about 93, 4, somewhere in there, we had some people managing our apartments for us. So they just really weren't doing that great of a job.
Mm.
Actually had a slow winter in there right before my brother came back. And so over the course of the winter, I figured out how to manage all the apartments, or, or thought I figured it out, but I started in on it and wrote an operations book, and so that one summer we took over our apartment management, and then my brother kind of came loose from his career, his early career, and he came back and started in on the property management side of the business. So he joined, I would
Okay.
say it was probably 96 or 7, I think, is probably when he came back to the company. Because when I started in
Okay.
92, it was my dad and a secretary. That was it. And he had a partner that was building houses on the land that he owned. So it was pretty small. We're up to about 65 employees now. So we've grown it quite a
Okay.
bit.
Yeah. If you work hard or train hard, you know the frustration of cleaning sweat out of your clothes. Most detergents just don't do it. They don't remove the sweat, especially from synthetic fabrics. Instead, they just mask the smell with strong fragrances. Do you ever wonder what those fragrances do to your skin and your body? You are left with flowery smelling, stiff clothes that start to stink immediately if you sweat even a little bit. The sweat wasn't really removed, it was just covered up until it gets wet again. Into the frustration with Athlete Fresh, a detergent designed specifically to get sweat and grime from all fabrics, including your favorite synthetics. It gets deep, breaks down bacteria and sweat enzymes, and rinses clear. No residue, no stiff clothes, no fragrance, and no stink. Athlete Fresh will actually clean up the residue other detergents leave behind. Athlete Fresh is environmentally friendly, and 5% of every purchase goes to charities. Check them out at athletefresh.shop/from the ground up show. Again, that was athletefresh.shop/from the ground up show. Yeah, so your older brother, he did not come back to the family business as quickly as you did. He had another career before that.
Yeah, he was a mechanical engineer out of SDSU as well, followed my dad's footsteps, but he went to Colorado, and he's working in a manufacturing facility out there. So he actually got a lot of really good training, which he can use, and all these, bring these skills back in as a family business is wonderful. So he did a lot of management training, like just in time inventory. It was kind of a new thing back then. So he was part of a management group that was running around trying to teach their suppliers how to supply the semiconductor company that he was working for. So he had a lot of really good
Okay.
opportunities to learn those those management techniques. So he was doing that until he got tired of it, and then he went out and started working on his own, following the entrepreneurial track of the family. He found himself in a little bit of a lull there, and we needed help, and the timing was right. So he came back for a summer visit, and by the end of it, we talked him into coming back to Sioux Falls to run the property management business. And that's where he
Okay.
started, but all the roles have changed since then.
Yeah. So it sounds like growing up, you decided to go to college without a mind to necessarily come back to the family business and then eventually return to get your MBA. Do you still feel like that was a wise track to take, or have you seen things shift when you're advising your own kids? Would you encourage them to take a similar track?
Oh, well, that's a timely subject for us because we're second. I'm generation. My siblings are second generation, and we got the young kids kind of coming out of college now. So they're that third generation is out there. My siblings and I have all felt very strongly it's that our kids, our nieces and nephews, go out and do your thing. Go out and explore the world and explore your careers. And if you have a inclination to come back, and it makes sense somewhere in the fabric of the organization, then that could be a possibility. But we really encourage them to go out and do their own thing, and the results of that are still outstanding. But we've got a civil engineer, which he's got the skill set to do it. But we've got nurses, we've got a graphic art, we've got a microbiologist, we've got one in medical school and one in mechanical engineering, and a couple of young ones in there. So yeah, so you don't really see anybody but the civil engineer, which he's on a happy track with his company. So I think he's satisfied for the most part. So so I don't know how that'll work, but what we've concentrated on within our organization, because we always knew, because all of us had kids late, that we're going to
Mm,
be pretty old by the time these kids would want to come in, that
yeah.
we really need to have a really strong group of professional managers, and that's really what we're working on. That's our strategic focus right at the moment, is getting that next group of people in that. We've got some good young leaders. We've got some really experienced leaders in there as well. So we've got this really great mix of professional management coming in that can manage the business and all the real estate portfolio that we've put together all these years. So that's how we're going to continue to manage the business going forward, and we'll see how the kids all make their decision that we did that. Family businesses are tricky, and there's a lot of failures out there, and we've been so
Mhm.
lucky with my parents as the type of founder that they are, where they're not micromanagers, not hovering over you and saying, well, this is the way I've done it for the last 25 years, and this is how you need to do it. They've been really good about starting with that first roll of blueprints. Go figure it out for yourself and make it happen. So
Yeah.
they really gave us a chance to go out there and to see succeed or fail, and do different things. And we're into areas of the development that my parents were never thought about and weren't interested in, and had very little excitement about it, during their time of really making those strategic decisions. So my siblings and I are so closely aligned, because we're out sweeping those houses and painting houses and mowing lawns together. We grew up in it. We understand what it takes. We can take long-term views. And so that's we're really fortunate to have that. So this next generation, as this third generation comes in, we really want to have them. We've already started having meetings so they understand the business better. We're laying some of that groundwork, no matter if they end up being owners of the company and someone else is running it, or if they're happen to find themselves inside of it. But we've always thought amongst my siblings is that if these kids are interested, we want them to go out and learn something and then bring that back and make us stronger. Just like my brother working in a semiconductor industry, figuring out how to do just in time delivery of material coming in. They gave him 2 years of training on how to, how to manage that. And then he was out there training people how to do that. So he brought all that back, back to the company. And I took that break and got a master's degree and bring that stuff back to the company to really, find those next steps, to make us, a better organization. So anyway, so we've, with the kids,
Gotcha.
we've always wanted them to say, coach them to like, go do your thing. Because if you want to be a nurse, we don't need nurses. That's not what we do. So if you want to be a nurse, go be a nurse. That's if that's your happy spot, go do it. So we don't want, we want them to come back for the right reasons because they want to come back rather than feel an
Yeah.
obligation, which that happens in a lot of family businesses that there gets to be an obligation that you got to come back and take care of it. So it's always,
Yeah.
it's tricky to balance those out, but that's the path we've picked.
That sounds like a great way to go. And as a second generation like yourself, I can appreciate that stance. That was kind of how my parents approach things. So you mentioned that you guys are branching into things that maybe your parents never imagined. Man, you guys just kind of have your hands in everything. Can you help us understand that development process a little bit? You said you started as a trust building company and then kind of moved into a construction company and a development company more to support the trust building. How has that growth continued? What have been the different steps as you've taken on different avenues of business?
Yeah, how we've morphed over time is, really because Sioux Falls is a small town. I mean, it's getting bigger, but it's a small town. So, what we've tried to do is we've always tried to diversify ourselves. The apartments. When I started came back in building apartments, historically, apartments are doing well financially and housing's not, or housing's doing well financially and apartments are not. So is that was the first iteration of trying to balance it out, so your income, it's you're not a feast or famine income, so that can hopefully steady out your income. We did that and built out that asset class, and built the apartments are generally a pretty nice steady piece of business, so that could hold us over when we hit things like 2006. I mean, that was a terrible time in my career, but so that you can push through those, even those, that was a really dark depression at that time, recession, whatever. But so trying to balance the portfolio out. So that's really where we started. So kind of going to, the early 90s, started building apartments. We got a housing going on, then housing took off. And then we got really busy and doing land development because when I say housing, we weren't building houses at that time. So we got really busy building land and land development, selling a lot of lots and opened up new subdivisions, because part of when my brother and I came back and joined my dad, it just gave us more people to do more stuff. So we went out there and really started, expanding. So when that housing boom was happening in those early 2000s, we're really in a good spot reputationally wise within the community and how we had our business set up, to really, push into that market and, expand our land development on the residential side during that time. So that was going good through the early 2000s. And then, somewhere about, like 2003, ish, 2004. This is something that my brother and I did. This is the area my parents really weren't that interested in, and started getting into the commercial development because we found this piece of ground that we really liked. So we got pretty excited about it, and we said, "Hey, we want to tackle this." And my dad's like, "I really don't want anything to do with that." And so he was, he was he challenged us a lot as far as wanting to move forward with it and making sure that we had our thoughts in order and our plans in order, that we could actually pull off something. It was a major undertaking. And it was probably a 15-acre commercial development right off the interstate, but it'd been sitting there for years. Every developer in town have been driving past it, just like we've been driving past it, like, doesn't make sense. It's too complicated. Whatever reason they passed, and we're the ones that are kind of putting our flag in the ground saying, "Hey, I think we can figure this thing out and make some money at it." So, those are the moments when development's pretty scary, because that's really when you're trying to, you're putting all your time and energy and resources into making something like this happen. But it's 15 acres, and I got to say, it was probably 150, 200,000 square feet. I forget how big of how many buildings we ended up putting in there. But so we really got excited about this idea. It really kind of created a whole new branch of our organization and getting the commercial development going. That project turned out really well. Our timing was good. We ended up with a completely amazing opening with a restaurant that was beyond successful, 5 times the expectations of the restaurant open operators, expectations when they opened it. So that momentum really helped, kick off the rest of the development, where we did a mixed use, multi-story mixed use building, high-end shops, more pedestrian open type development, where we really tried to take some of the stuff that we saw out of the Sioux Falls market, brought it into Sioux Falls, where Sioux Falls is basically building, things that are indoor malls or just strip centers where you pull up, run in the front door because it's 20 below zero, and run back out, get your stuff. But we created an environment where it was pedestrian friendly. People could shop, go door to door and shop, and really make it a nice built environment. And so, a lifestyle center, that was the buzzword at the time. We still do use those terms now, but it's truly the first lifestyle center in Sioux Falls, and it worked, really well. So that was kind of that next generation, kind of the early 2000s of what our company was. And that really set the stage for us to do follow on. We did an office park that was very similar in nature to that. And we started doing off our office and commercial build outs all around town. And it was really kind of cemented our reputation as a commercial developer. And with all that activity, that got the notice, of, additional partners that we have, or clients that we that have these very nice pieces of property, around the Sioux Falls community, that aren't fully, they're not performing financially like they should, because they're just, farm fields or gravel pits, or, those types of things. So we've got people coming to us now saying, hey, how do we take this, this expired gravel pit or this farm field, and turn it into something that's income producing? So we either partner with them, or we'll work for them as a fee developer. We'll figure it all out for them, and we can help them activate that, that resource that they've got for their family, and then figure out how to build some long-term income for them. But all that commercial development, kind of the early 2000s, that super successful corner that we put together, that really paved the way for us working for another family in town, the Friesen family. They came to us and said, hey, you guys did this beautiful corner over there. Why don't you come help us with this other project, which, they were calling it's called Lake Lorraine, still called Lake Lorraine today, but that's, it's a 100-acre, development around an old gravel pit that they've been mining out for 40 years. So they had this beautiful lake that was all fed by the aquifer. So nice clean water. And around Sioux Falls, there is no water, so if you got a lake, it's really kind of something special. But they wanted to put a walking path, a 1 mile walking path around it, give that whole lake and that walking path, the walking path, the park around the lake, back to the community, back to the city of Sioux Falls, because Sioux Falls has been good to that family, and they wanted to give something back. So that was kind of their idea. And they said, we need help developing this out, and you've done a good job with these other projects, so you can come help us. So we turned that into, one of the first things is a 180,000 square foot, national retail power center, Hobby Lobby, Home Goods, DSW, that typical lineup of retailers. So that was kind of our landmark piece. And we also, in that development, we wanted office, so we got a 65, 70,000 square foot, office building to come out there. We got some neighborhood services where we put in some, some restaurants and some eye doctors and some chiropractors and a vet clinic and a sushi place. Then we ended up with, oh gosh, there must be 150 rooms in there. But we had Ryan Companies out of Minneapolis buy a piece of land, and they built just a absolutely beautiful, a senior living facility, as another anchor piece. And then we had a apartment developer to really build very urbanized, like something you'd see in downtown Sioux Falls. We'd come out to our lake, it's on the west side of Sioux Falls, and build this really nice apartment building with a lot of amenities. So all that's kind of our core out there that we've managed to build and fill up, probably about 90% of this lake over the last 10 years. We got caught in COVID in there, so that put us back a little bit, but we got a hotel out there. And then Sam Clickman, that's how he introduced us. And that's why I'm sitting here today. But, he joined out there. We built him a building sitting right on the lake, and a Big Lost Meaderies right there on the lake. And it looks just like his other store out west. And it's just absolutely beautiful and looks like it's doing quite well for him. So, but that's small world, right?
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
why I'm here, is our mutual connection with Sam.
Well, you mentioned in that story a few difficult steps, kind of venturing into uh, different avenues of business, different sectors. The 2006, 2008 time period. What has been the most difficult thing you have faced in running your business?
It's always people is the biggest thing. That's the most important thing. So running a small business, because we've always kept it too small for too long, to a fault, because we're just, we've
Yeah.
being entrepreneurs in the family, having grown up in entrepreneurs. I mean, before 2005, my parents lived through 25% interest rates in the late 70s. So they had a huge run through the 70s, and then the 70s and the early 80s, it was a disaster. So it was, my dad's generation calls that the builder depression, is, and because there's hardly anything going on back in those years. So there's been these major cycles, but it really all depend. The people has probably been the biggest thing, because we've always been too tight organizationally. Not adding too many people in the organization. So we've always run very thin. Finding those people that are that work with us. That's always been our challenge. And so it's we've historically has been our biggest challenge. But in the last couple of years, we've really made major strides in trying to round out the company, fill all the departments in the company. We hired a marketing director, we hired an HR director, and we hired a COO, to come in. Those are all new roles, but we were probably 5 years behind when we should have hired them and brought those people in. So that's always been the
Yeah.
challenge of trying to keep that in balance, because it's you have these big huge projects, you need a lot of people, and then it's a small market and things slow down, so then you're not so busy for a while. So we're always been hesitant to staff things up, more than we
Yeah.
more than we should. But I think we might have finally learned our lesson.
Well, and that's kind of the entrepreneur's curse is you think you can do it all yourself right up until you can't.
Yeah, exactly. So, and we did, and a big part of our story too is my younger brother came back in about 15 years ago, and he was running our commercial construction, and then up until about 3 years ago too. So he stepped out and decided to yeah, pursued a different path, a couple of years ago. So we lost a leg of our, the three-legged stool with the brothers in there. So we lost a leg of the stool. So that, that's been a crimp, back to the people part of it, but, backfilling him with a director of operations and getting a COO in there and getting the right personnel has kind of fulfilled all that stuff. Or kind of the strategic drive to get a professional management group in place. We're there. We're just getting everyone working really well as a group now. So it's fun. It's fun to be a part of.
Good. Well, that kind of leads me into my next question. I know you guys do development, property management, building apartments, building commercial properties, single family homes. You kind of have your fingers in everything. Which sector of your business is most rewarding and which sector is the most profitable?
Well, whatever's working well is really rewarding. The stuff that's not working so well, that's not rewarding. That's just a lot. That's where you end up spending a lot of extra time. I think, the part that we love, I mean, and I think this is universal, not just me or my family, my brothers, my sister, the people that work there. I think it's just universal. The thing that's really rewarding about what we do with development is that we take these ideas of, this bare piece of ground, and we turn it into a building that somebody lives in, somebody, has an office in, or they're selling dresses out of, or they're manufacturing fire trucks out of. It's actually getting used. And after all the after those projects are done, you can go back, 10, 15, 20 years later. It's like, I did that, I mean, like I had a piece of that, I had a hand in, getting that there, and people are coming and going and enjoying it, so that's all the rewarding stuff, because it's really fun to be in that process. It comes out in so many different ways. We have a lot of opportunities to work with, fellow entrepreneurs, you know, a new law firm, or a dentist, or an eye doctor, or someone that wants to open a daycare, just, and they come to you and it's like, I'm going to quit my job and I got all this money saved up and I'm going to do my own thing. And I'm super nervous, but I've been planning on this. And now I got to figure out how to like get a facility put together. And when I've got a super tight budget, everyone's always got a super tight budget, but really working with those people where it's just like, hey, it's going to be okay. It's just like, we're going to figure it out, because we've been done this so many times, because, our job as a developer builder, our job is to help the project get done in whatever form that makes sense for the client. So it's a lot of fun to work with the entrepreneurs to help them, get to a spot where they can go to work and, sell the widgets that they're selling out of the front door. So that's really fun. So I really enjoy that. But it's also difficult. It's all, just difficult because everyone's got different experiences and different expectations. So it just takes a lot of time and energy to get that. As far as you said, what's the most profitable? A lot of the service stuff that we do. The commercial construction, property management, home building, now we do build houses now, all that stuff is, very tight margins, all that, all those activities, so it's not an easy business, so, going back to what's your biggest challenge is the people. If we didn't have good people helping us, keep those businesses running, at a high level, delivering quality on time, on budget, with happy customers, it'd be really difficult to make money in those areas, so they're all real tight margin businesses, but they make sense to us because we look at it holistically, because we're really trying to build it out where we could take care of, a customer wherever their needs might be. We might rent somebody an apartment and they're moving to town to go run Walmart, and that's happened, so they're going to be the new assistant manager at Walmart. What do they need next? They're going to live in an apartment for 6 months until they can figure out where they want to build a house, so then we do a good job renting an apartment and servicing them in the apartment, making that a good experience. And we tell them, hey, we build houses too. And it's like, hopefully we get a call, and it's like, you guys did a great job
Yeah.
over here. It's a group that's not related to our home building group, but our home building group has a good relationship already built up, and then they'll do a good job building a house for them, and then, then that person hopefully tells their friend that we did a good job, and they know that we do brokerage work, and that friend's looking for a new office space. They'll hire one of our brokers to go, help them rent a new office, so it's very, we like this idea that we could really take care of any real estate services that our clients might need. So that really makes us unique in the Sioux Falls market, that we can handle all of it, on the consumer side, but also on the business side, and do anything that they would need, and build that customer for the long term is what we're really trying to strive for.
Oh man, you can rent them an apartment and sell them a lot and build them a house and then build their business and
Yeah, yeah,
do pretty much anything they need.
yeah, and I think that's just that's what makes it hard, the business, because then you got to be good at all those different things, because we're
Mm.
we're because there's just home building companies, there's just property management companies, there's just brokerage companies. So it's hard to run. So we're running several different companies under one umbrella, but for the diversification of income, so you're healthy over the long term, so we have a good place for people to work. Because another thing we love to do in our organization is that if we really want to create a place where people can stay for the long term, as we know them and build trust with each other, but we can get young leaders in. They might start in one area of our company, and if another opportunity works in, opens up in another area of the company, that if their careers maybe hit a lid for whatever reason in one part of the company, that they can look at another spot and say, I want to go help over there and work in that area. So we keep that good person as they progress through their career. That's one of the things that we're trying to do to make a better working environment. As people, we spend a lot of time together in our work environment, so we want to make it as good as we can.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that's a laudable goal. I know that was one of the big motivations for me in growing my business was I had people working under me that wanted an upward track and wanted to go to the next thing, and I didn't have something to hand them. So we have to grow and get bigger to create more opportunities. So
Right.
you've now been in this business for quite some time. You've seen a lot of ups and downs and been in a lot of different businesses essentially. At what point in your career were you most afraid, and what was the threat that you were afraid of?
Well, 2006 was a big one. That was pretty intense. I mean, we are pretty heavily weighted towards housing at that time, and
Mm.
because we had stopped building apartments there for quite a while. So that was, we had times, well, the year before, I'd say like 2005, I think we sold 197 lots, single family lots. And in 2007, we sold 17. So that's about, you know, zero in that business. It doesn't,
Yeah.
that's not enough to pay the light bill, so to speak. So that was pretty nerve wracking. We hadn't seen a banker in our office for 5, 6, 7 years. And when that hit in 2006, 2007, there came out every month like, what's going on? Because back at that time, the federal regulators were pulling every single housing and land development loan that they had, in the entire country, and reviewing those with high scrutiny. And so the banks would come out to us like,
Mm.
what's going on? And, what's the activity? And we're like, there's not much activity out here. We're just flat. There's just no one was buying anything. So that was pretty scary time. That was nerve wracking, because it's, you never know how long that stuff's going to last. And family history, my dad went through that as big of a disaster in the late 70s. He said it's worse. It really was, because nobody could even afford to buy anything back then. He said nobody wants to buy anything right now, but the interest rates are cheap enough that people still could do it, but everything had kind of shut down. So that was a wild time. We had 3 developers go bankrupt in Sioux Falls. Major developers go bankrupt in Sioux Falls at that time. So it was real. It hit Sioux Falls as hard as the rest of the country. I think what saved our community is that we had some good long-term developers, that community-minded people that just felt like we could. I don't. No one got together and decided this, but in retrospect, I think it was just enough of us is like our mindset, just kind of that we just need to ride this out and not dump a bunch of inventory and crash all the prices and create a bunch of equity losses, which would have rattled the market more. Everyone kind of gripped the steering wheel a little tighter and rode it out is really what happened. Yeah, that was pretty intense. And then the other one was COVID for sure. I mean that was wild. I mean we have hundreds of leases with national retailers, local offices, whatever. So COVID hit, and the nationals calling up like that big 180,000 square foot power center called up and said we're not going to pay rent. Done. It's like, well, you got to pay rent, and your real estate taxes are due twice a year in South Dakota, so they're not paying rent, and real estate taxes are coming. That's a gigantic bill. So that's a pretty big cash flow crunch that you're staring at, because we got loans, so the bank, so you get that phone call. It's like, well, the bank wants to get paid, power company wants to get paid, the county wants to get paid real estate taxes, how's this going to work out, so so that was wild, which that what turned out, and everyone did the same thing, is the banks froze their payments for a while, for 60, 90 days, just because they knew all this was going all the way around the country, so they didn't want everything to melt down, because all the rent payers quit paying, and then so then we were caught in the middle, so the bank stopped, froze the payments, but then what they did is we reworked our loans with the banks, redid everything, lengthened everything out, and it worked that out with the banks. But then we had to rewrite, I don't know if it's right or not, but we say we rewrote every lease that we had that summer, so it was just a massive, massive effort. Our property management department was absolutely amazing, to get through that, because it's just a mind-boggling amount of work. And I mean, we talk to the local restaurant owners and dress shops and coffee shops, and you're talking to these people. I mean, they've got payroll. You think about it on their perspective, they're trying to figure out how to make payroll, and they're trying to figure out how to make
Yeah.
rent and pay insurance and everything else that they've got. They're a lot of them are sole proprietors, so they got home mortgages to pay and no jobs, this is their job. So they're on a cash crunch. I mean, they're absolutely freaking out would be the best way to describe it, so the whole system is like completely in disarray. So those are the two big ones. So hopefully we don't have that again, but
Okay.
they seem to,
Yeah.
you think about it, 70s, 2000s, and 2020, every 20, 30 years you get a pretty nasty one. So odds
Yeah.
are it's gonna happen again.
Hopefully we got a good decade or so ahead of us. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't want it, but yeah, you just, so the key is that, you got to be prepared for it. In 2005 and
mhm.
6, we well, by 2007, I think we're starting to say this about 2007 because we're into it pretty good. And we always thought we were joking. We thought we always had a contingency plan, but we didn't realize that we had a disaster plan because we're conservative enough that we just survived a disaster, but we're always playing our cards tight, because, um, when it's easy to get eaten up in the development construction world very quickly with cash flow, so you got to,
Yeah.
it's like farming. It's a big equity game.
Oh man. Yeah, for sure. Was there a lesson that you've learned that you wish you would have learned earlier?
Well, um, those old guys are right more often than they're wrong because they've been through it before. So they always like, this is
Eh,
what's going to happen. And, as a young guy, you're like, yeah, okay, I hear you. But, and then you get through it and like, dang it, they were right again. So yeah, find some advisors, some people that have been through it before, maybe not even in the same industry, but find some advisors that have been through it before because they've seen it. I
yeah.
remember I'm super involved in the Home Builders Association, Sioux Falls, and on the national level. Starting back to the '90s, but as we're into 2003, 2004. Guys that are my age but new to the industry. They didn't have they didn't have a dad sitting in an office keeping your head on straight, and then they didn't have your dad's friends that you go hunting with and hang out with. You can have these casual conversations with the guys that have been through the '70s and '80s and what it took to get them through. So I remember talking to guys that are
Yeah.
pretty close to my same age, and we're hanging out at home builders, and everything's great, right? It's 2005. There's people are lining up to buy. Whatever you build, someone's going to buy it. So it's just that easy. At that time frame, and I'm like, you guys, get ready. Just make sure you're putting money away, and keeping your debt low. Because you could see them buying new trucks every 6 months and stuff. Obvious things that they're spending money on. We all were. And it's just like, you guys, keep your head down because this thing could shift. And I remember some of those guys, you didn't believe it at all. We're contemporaries, so I'm passing on the wisdom I'm hearing. to them. And some of those guys, they just, they're gone, by the time that's all over, they don't have a business anymore, but some of them,
Yeah.
that, play the cards a little tighter. They survive that. If you survive those things, that's the good news. When you survive those things, there's usually a lot of opportunity afterwards, because if you're stable enough, and you get through that, operationally, financially, there's a lot of opportunity because people are so, the rest of your competition's a bit hamstrung because they got hurt a little bit more, so it takes them a little while to get going. But when things start turning around, if you're in good shape coming out of a recession like that, that gives you a lot of chance to really, fire. I don't know. I guess one thing I would say is you can start running if you're not in a hole first. If you're in a hole, you got to got to get yourself out of the hole to start running. And if you're standing around just waiting for something to happen, you can start running a lot faster than the guys trying to get out of the hole.
That's a good way
So
to put it.
it's
Yeah.
yeah, so it's always felt, like even, those are the big ones, and there's been, obviously little dips here and there along the way too, but yeah, so it pays to be conservative.
Yeah. Good lessons there. Is there something like an opinion that you once held strongly that you've changed your mind about throughout your career?
Boy, no, I think not really. It's you just it just seems like you just got to work hard. I never felt like, I don't know. I'm gonna change the thought process. I mean, when I started out, I didn't know what I was doing building those apartments. I told you that story. That when I got
Yeah.
that roll of paper and said go build these apartments, I didn't know what I was doing. So what I figured out is that the people, when I went and talked to the plumber or the electrician or the framer or the concrete guy that's been doing this for 25 years, and I went up to them and said, help me understand what I'm looking at here, and what should we be making a decision on? Not what should I be making a decision on, what should we be making a decision on? And they'll help you. They'll help you get through that, and they'll give you all their information, all their experience, and help you make a good decision so the project turns out well. But you just need to be uh, uh, confident in yourself enough to listen to them, and humble enough to
Mm.
listen to them, and really find out what they're trying to tell you and what they're saying to you. So I think that shaped me. And so getting back to your questions, there's something that I've ever had this really hard opinion on something that I had to change over the course of time. My answer is no, because I figured out that I just, the world keeps changing, and there's all sorts of things that I don't know that I need to know. But I just need to go ask the people that know those things to help us make the best decision possible. I don't really have these hardcore beliefs that this is the way it should be, because stuff all changes. Everything changes and moves along. So you just got to be curious, and ask people the right questions. So I just keep moving with the times, I guess, is what I feel like, more than having a stuck opinion on something. My
Gotcha.
kids might disagree.
There's some wisdom in that. No, there's some wisdom in that of you observe and see what's going on and then make a decision rather than coming in with an opinion to begin with. So, yeah.
And ask people, learn from the people.
If you could go back to 1992, coming out of college with the option to pursue a career elsewhere or come back to the family business, would you choose to do it all over again?
Not 92, no. That's part of where
No.
my personal opinion applies to, the next generation is like, go out and do your thing first, because I came back, and
Mm.
it felt like I settled for a long time, just to, that
Yep.
I didn't really want to be back here. I wanted to be doing something else. I don't know what that was, but I didn't want to be back in Sioux Falls at that time, and working as hard as I found myself at that time. So I wish I would have had a chance for a long time to go out and find my way and see if there's something else that was out there. So yeah, I wouldn't have come back. If things would have been different, I wouldn't have come back. But I mean, it was long term, it's right. It's clearly the right decision. So, but it was yeah, I think go out and explore, and take your time to figure out where you want to be long term, because it's a long life. You can change your career multiple times. So go out and learn some stuff and bring it back. So yeah, I would hold off, I guess, would if I was going to advise myself back in '92, go wait tables for a while until you found a job, I guess.
Okay. All right. And what has been your biggest win as a leader? What are you most proud of?
Oh, uh, I think one thing that I'm pretty proud of, we within Home Builders, we cooked up a, a, a Street of Dreams concept. Because I was always on the education committee. We're trying to figure out how to fundraise money, for scholarships, because get keep people in the trades, get people in the trades and interested in the trades. So Home Builders are always active in like Tools for Schools is one of their programs where the industrial arts programs have been completely line itemed out in our area. So the home builders go out and buy table saws and drills and get it to the high schools, so they can, the kids can learn how to use that stuff to get them into the
Mm,
trades. Because if we don't have builders out there, electricians and plumbers out there, you're not going to live anywhere. So home builders always been super involved. So it was a lot of fun. So we always did fundraisers, but we ended up working together, and kind of a integral part of that was getting we always have a parade of homes every year where there's 20 houses that you can go visit and go view, and it's a nice marketing event, and it's a good chance for people to connect with new housing, great chance to connect with new housing. But we did a Street of Dreams where we did a cul-de-sac where we did 5 houses built at the same time, open at the same time, and we had them open for 3 4 weeks, and we charge an entrance fee because we knew people love to go to that stuff, and we saw that in other markets, so they pay entrance fee to get in there. So that ran for 3 years, but it's such a heavy lift, such so many volunteer hours. But it was really gratifying to be a part of that, just to see how much money we raised, thousands. I forgot how much it was now, but it was a big deal to really set up that endowment. So that was fun. So I mean, doing things like that as a leader has been fun along the way.
I see, in at least in my area here in Wyoming, there's been a shift back towards the trades, and our local high school is doing a great job of funding the woods department, their construction classes, that kind of things. Do you guys see a swing back that direction, or are you still fighting an uphill battle there?
It's I'm a little removed from that now, but like 3 4 years ago, one of our school districts, we got 5 school districts in town. One of our school districts partnered with the Home Builders Association, and the Home Builders, like that Street of Dreams project I was telling you, and all the other fundraising, provided the money, built like a indoor, or built a building that the kids in the Harrisburg School District can go build a house in. So the school district stepped up to it, home builders stepped up to it and did, paid for the building and the tools, but then the school district is running the program for the long term. So it's building back in, building back up. We've had a lot of, so I think the answer to the question is yes. There's been a lot of momentum, back towards the trades in
Yeah.
Sioux Falls and South Dakota. We've had really good leadership on the state side. They do this Build Dakota scholarship. It's pretty, a lot of kids could get scholarships into the trade schools, like, get the 2 years totally paid for if they agree to work for a couple of years after. So we got a lot of that going on. It's robust now. It's been going on for a good 10 years, and the tech schools are expanding. We actually opened up a community college, so you can get an associate's degree, maybe not so much trade schoolish, but but it gives you a technical degree that you can use to get that first good job, and then if you want to go finish college online somewhere, you could go do that later on if you choose to keep moving forward. So it's been a lot of shit, but there's been a lot of momentum in our community. Home Builders, the Chamber of Commerce, the Sioux Falls Development Foundation, trying to build out and expand those programs. Really trying to get people engaged with the jobs, because it's like 50% of the kids don't make it through college. They enter college. I was shocked when I first saw those. I think it's over 50%.
Yeah.
So we gotta give our kids a better path. Rather than send them to college that they don't make it through, get them into a trade that's meaningful. And there's plenty of work. We've got super low employment. We always have. 2-3% unemployment. I think one was like 1.7 here not that many months ago. I mean, Sioux Falls is, it's growing so fast that the unemployment's always way below everybody else in the region. So yeah, so it's nice.
Yeah.
It's nice to see some of that stuff coming back. And I mean, there's a lot of people paying attention to it, putting energy and dollars behind it, create those opportunities.
Yeah, I've been excited about it in our area, and man, I think the opportunity available in the trades for the next generation is just going to be incredible for those that are willing to take it.
Yeah, agree.
Has any of that shifted your opinion about education, and what advice would you have for someone pursuing a career that's maybe in high school now? Do you feel like college is as important as it was, or extremely important, or are there more opportunities in the trades? What educational advice would you have for a high school student looking forward to their future?
Get it, keep going, whatever makes sense to you. I mean, if college
Mm,
makes sense to you, go do it, or community college or trade school, just take that next step, whatever works, so if you go to a trade school and finish that program and go get a job and then start working your way through college, if you choose to do that, down the road, those opportunities are always there, but just keep building up, so whatever the right avenue is for you is just, find it and do it. It's, education can never be taken away. When you learn how to learn, you get curious and you can,
mm,
figure out more things and expand, expand your career. So I think, uh, yeah, just find a way to move forward. Beyond high school. We gotta, high school career or a high school education, isn't really enough. I think to find those good jobs out there. Having a technical school or a associate's degree from a community college or a bachelor's degree. I mean, you need those things to really prove yourself out. Yeah, I think it's important, but it's every answer is not for every person. But just go get one of them. Move yourself ahead.
This is my favorite question that I ask of every guest. Are you a person of a particular faith tradition? And if so, how has that shaped your leadership?
Yeah, we're just joking about that the other day. So I was raised Catholic, and I married my wife's Lutheran, so I got married in a Lutheran church. And one of our friends is their daughter's converting from Lutheran to Catholicism this weekend actually, and we're talking about all the stuff that he had to do. My wife said, I said, you didn't have to do that to be a Lutheran. And I said, well, I don't know if I am a Lutheran because no one ever asked me to send my Catholic card back in. So I don't know if I'm a Catholic or a Lutheran. It's we always been around it. We took our kids all the way through confirmation in our local church because we wanted them to be aware of what's going on, and that, inside those big buildings, and why people get so much out of it. We thought it was important to expose our kids, and the values are great. So we're not active members per se. My wife is more than I am. Try to live by the values that are common throughout. Is what we're about. It's good. A lot of good people spend a lot of time there for sure.
Good, good. So, your dad started the business. You've been involved for over 30 years. You've been running it for quite a while now. Guys have grown it to incorporate a lot of different aspects and different sectors. What is next? Where do you go from here?
The fun. I mean, it's always fresh. So we're working on. I spent most of my week working on a new development. In another one of our communities surrounding Sioux Falls this week. So I spent half my week working on that, and it's the same, things that you got to get done, but we're coming up with a new twist on it to make it exciting, to make it a better place to, to live. For the people in that community have a better place to live and give them a reason to sell their house and go build a new one. That's really that's what housing's about. However, and last week I was spending a whole bunch of time working on a new office park that we're working on in the south end of Sioux Falls. So the work is very variable, from week to week, and different things need different attention at different moments. So it's that's what's I'm not quite sure what's next. Just we'll keep finding more of these projects, but that's it's fun, to work through those and try to figure out a better way to present make the product new and exciting, and people want to engage with it and buy it or rent it or you know build on it, whatever the case. So that's we'll just keep finding those things. So that's the exciting part. On the project side, the business side of it, really, I really am truly excited with the staff that we've got within our organization, and we've got this great team now, and we're really gelling up and able to do a lot of things that we need to do and want to do, and it's going to be fun to watch them grow and take the company to maybe places we weren't expecting by giving them some room and some latitude to be the leaders that they are. So there's a couple exciting things going on. There's always the daily development, but the long-term strategy of getting some great people in place. That'll be fun. That'll be gratifying.
Is there a particular part of your business that you really get excited about and you kind of hang on to and like doing yourself? Is it finding the new development or building homes or the commercial or customer interaction, or is there a particular part of your business that you really enjoy?
Yeah. I mean, the development side of it. I mean, that's the really tricky part, like the land development. I call it, the entitlement work, and trying to get a cornfield to be build ready or have some sort of structure on there that's usable. That's the part that's gonna be the hard part to let go, because so you have to have a lot of knowledge about a lot of different things, because we view as a developer as filling the gaps between the real estate broker who understands the market, between the architect who understands how to build things, between the civil engineer who understands how to put land together, between the banks and how to finance it. There's all these like really good professionals around, but the developer's job is to all those cracks, to get a project move forward. You got to be able, someone's got to be in the middle of it, just saying, yeah, we can do that, civil engineer. But if we do that, when I go down to City Hall and talk to the city's engineers or the city's planning department, they're going to say no, because they got a whole set of rules that we need to abide by. So being able, having that, that knowledge of all those different areas, not being an expert in all of them, but having gone through so many projects, that you know where to find the answer, who's got the answer, which direction not to run down because it's going to end in a dead end, and so you can avoid those pitfalls. So that's the tricky part, because it's so multidimensional. So that's hard for us to envision, how to replicate that. But all the individual pieces, we've got good people, either employed or working for us that can um, fill in all those roles to get that to go. So anyway, so that's the tricky part, but it's also the fun part. It's also the frustrating part. So it's you get it all when you're doing it. But that's the place that'll be the last spot that will exit. As far as my brother and I and our family is, the actual development work, because that's tricky.
Yeah.
But there's people out there. There's people out there that can do it. We just need to keep training our people up to do that over the long term. But we'll hang in there for a long time.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Is there somebody that you'd like to see on the show? Somebody that has a really interesting background and interesting business, works in an interesting industry that you'd like to learn more about?
Yeah, I got a young man that is from Sioux Falls. He has been in China since 2019. He went there as part of the State Department exchange program in high school, and that was his senior in college. Our kids grew up with him. Our families know each other. He went to China, went to that program, loved it. So ended up going to NYU Beijing. So he's starting a whole company over there, and I'm not quite sure what he does, but he has an office in Shanghai. He has partners, he has employees. He's just lighting the world on fire over there. But I do know a little bit of what he's doing. But what he's trying to do is get consumer products from this area of the country because he understands this area of the country or anywhere in the United States, but this area of the country, and try to get them, help us sell stuff in China, is what he's working
Okay.
on, as I understand it. So
Yeah.
if that were interesting, I could introduce you to a person like that. So he's a
Oh man.
dynamic guy.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. I might send you an email after we're done here, see if you can introduce us. I'm always interested in an interesting story or an interesting background. So if you don't mind connecting us offline, I'll probably reach out and have you do that.
Okay.
My last question here, to either fuel or settle the debate. If you have a job to do and have to use a cordless tool, which brand do you prefer?
I saw that on your list. I was gonna you asked it a slightly different way, so I was gonna answer the Apple iPhone because that is the tool that I use most of the time. So, but yeah, I beyond that, Ryobi. I use the Ryobi because it's all interchangeable. I can keep swapping out those things, and it's a lot of it's a yard guide stuff. Not the professional grade stuff, but it works good. The batteries seem to last a long time and
Yeah. Yeah.
get good power out of them. So can't argue with that.
They do, and they have a great warranty. I think when I was a kid, I had a set of Ryobi stuff, and that was great stuff.
Yeah, well, you have to keep your eyes open. My wife had just read me an article that in the School of Mines out in Rapid City, these guys just developed a battery out of biomass. So they're using corn, like a corn derivative, and they're
Wow.
created. It works, but they've created a battery out of it. So maybe that'll be the new one that'll win someday. But you never know.
Oh man, yeah, that would be impressive. Awesome. Well, Steve, thank you so much for joining us. You bring a wealth of knowledge and an incredible amount of experience in a number of different industries. I just appreciate your time and your wisdom, and thank you so much for lending it to us.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks for having me.
Thank all of you guys for joining us again here on From the Ground Up Show. Again, check out our new merchandise store, shop.fromthegroundupshow.com. You can find us on social media at From the Ground Up Show. Like, share, follow, subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, YouTube, or social media. And take a moment here, send this episode to a friend that you would think might benefit from it. And come back next week to check out another interview on From the Ground Up Show. Until next time, keep grinding.